Hi, this is Paul Solt from iPhone Dev TV. We're continuing the game demo and we're working on making the points a little bit more interesting. So if I start the game, we can move stuff around. We get a lot of points, but there's no difficulty here. So removing points is one way to add difficulty to a game, and we're going to have to work within the run loop of our game. So the problem we have here is we're dealing with points as an integer value. So that's what we want to display to the user. But since we're working with these updates per second, you can see that if I were to just subtract 1 every time we have a game update, so I'm in my game update loop, let's see what happens. So let's say points, and it's the underscore points, minus equals 1. That will subtract 1 point every second. Now we want to visualize it, so we'll use the handy little trick that I've shown you before, and this is our points label dot text is going to equal the square bracket, and then we're going to box up our variable here. So we just say points in here, that turns it into a NS number, and then we can call the string value on it. And so that will allow us to output. And if I hit the play button, we hit play, you'll see we're losing about 60 points a second. And so that's not what we want. So we're going to have to go in here and figure out how to make this so that we can work with fractional points, because only removing 60 points a second doesn't give us a whole lot of flexibility here. And even if I tried like something like 0.1, if we were to stop and run, what will happen? We don't lose any points. Now, so the issue we have is points is an integer value, so it's a whole number, and subtracting 0.1 results in an expression that's the same number. So that's not going to do what we want, and we're going to have to use another variable. So I'm going to create a variable called points to remove, and we're going to keep track of how many whole points we need to remove and how many sort of partial points that we're tracking. So let's go ahead, and up at the top, I'm going to stop this. We're going to add a variable, and it's going to be a double, and it's points to remove. And then down here, and actually I want to add one constant. So we're going to have a static constant, and I guess we'll make it a double, and this will be points per second. So it's going to be removed points per second. And we're going to set this initially, let's go with something like, I think 15 sounds a lot better to me. If I wanted to do, I could do something like 15.5, and that will be something that we'll be able to support with our new variable that's going to be keeping track of how many points we need to remove. And we're going to keep track of the partial points as well as the whole number points. So there's a handy little function in the C++ or the C programming guide that we can use, and I believe we can get to it from the terminal. So if you open an app called Terminal, you just type in terminal, you should be able to get to a man page. So these are documentation pages, and we're going to use a function called ModF. So if you type man ModF, that will give you information about this function that we're going to do. And basically what it does is it separates something into two different parts. But if you don't want to use the manual pages, that's what man stands for, I recommend using Safari. So let's just Google ModF reference. This should give us the documentation and some code examples so we can see how it works. So let's go right here. And if I scroll down, we can see what this function is going to do. So we have a value that we're going to input. We have a fractional part and an integral part. And if we run this, we see that it outputs this right here. So it's going to take in the parameters and separate them. We can subtract the whole value, which is this integral part, and we can keep track of our partial values in the app. So let's go back to the app, and where's Xcode? All right, so points to remove is something that we're going to keep track of, and we're going to use the current time to get a constant that's going to allow us to do a certain number per second. So if we just use the current time interval from the timer, so timer.timeInterval, and we multiply that by our current constant. So we have a k remove points per second. So that's how many points we're going to remove per second. And by multiplying by this constant, which is a fractional portion, we'll only remove a small portion every second, so that when we multiply that by 60, they'll cancel out and we'll be just removing this value. So it's a little bit of arithmetic here. Don't worry too much. I'm going to comment out the previous line, and then we're going to have a double value that's going to keep track of our whole points. So I'll call it whole points, and we'll set that to 0 initially. And then we're going to use that ModF function. So the output from the ModF function, we're going to set back to points to remove. This is going to keep track of all of the partial points. So when we use it, there might be like 0.1 points left, and we want to keep track of that fractional portion in our application. And here we're going to call the function modf. It takes two parameters. One's going to be a pointer value, and the other one is just going to be the current value. So we type in points to remove here. So that's going to pass in a number. So it might start off that we're starting with a number that's going to be 3.14. And what we're expecting is that points to remove is going to equal 3. And then we're going to separate that. So it's going to be 3.0. And then we're going to separate that from our whole points, which is going to, actually I mixed this up. So points to remove is actually going to be 0.14. And then the fractional portion is going to be 3.0. So we're going to separate it into those two pieces. And that's what this function does. So the value it returns, if we look at the documentation, if I scroll up, we see that it has two parameters. It has x and it has int part. So here is the method signature. It's kind of small. And the return value we see is the fractional part. So let's go back to Xcode. And now that we're passing in the value, this is going to be our fractional part, which is going to be the 0.14 in this example. And then the double, it's a pointer value. So we actually need to do the address of the whole points. And the reason we do this is because a function can only return one value, but we actually want to get, two values returned. And so doing the address of another value allows this function to actually modify this value so that we have the whole points. And then we can use that to subtract from our current value. So I should be able to say points minus equal whole points. And then the other thing I need to, no, I guess that's all. So let's see if this works. And no, it's not working. Okay, so the problem I have here is that we're always pulling stuff out. Let's see what we're doing here. Okay, I see what my problem is. I need to do a plus equals here to keep adding points. We weren't adding enough points, so it was never going up. So now you can see that we're subtracting, I believe, around 15.5 points a second. So that's one way we can control it. And if you missed out, it's because I had a bug here where I was not adding all of the new points to remove. So this is removing points for us, and it's keeping track of these values. If you want, you can print out values to see what this looks like. And this is a floating point value. And I'll just print out points to remove and the whole points. And it's points to remove, so we'll rerun it. We'll hit play, and you can see every now and then we have 1 point to remove. If I were to make our constant a little bit bigger, so let's go up to the top. Let's say we want to remove, maybe you're playing a game like Diablo or something like that, where there's lots of points moved, or World of Warcraft, we have huge hit points. You might want a bigger number. So here we're removing 15,000.5 points every second. So you can see this is how we can control the difficulty of the game. And I don't even know if we play the game, if we can keep up with that. So let's try moving this around. And it's still going down. So let's try and get both fingers. You have to time it right. I'm holding the Alt key to get both of this. And you can see that it is still going down. So that is way too difficult. It's impossible to win. Let's do 150 a second. Let's see if I can move these two views 150 pixels a second. Maybe just one of them. Look. All right, so it looks like I can move one view. If I'm quick enough, I can move this back and forth, and we're getting a positive score. But as soon as I let go, my score starts to disappear. So that is some logic for actually giving some challenge here. And we're using a crazy math function to separate the whole numbers from the fractional portions. And then we're subtracting those whole points when they exist. And as you can see, if we just look in here, you can see the numbers as we add fractional portions and then how many. So this first portion is the current fractional portion. And then we have, it's either removing 2 or 3 or so, and it keeps sort of repeating similar numbers as it's going. So we can stop this now. So now what we've done is we've been able to figure out how to work with the points a little bit more to add some gameplay. If we open up the app again, I guess the question is, what do you want to add? Is there something that you see here that would be interesting? Maybe you want to make the views keep animating when we move. So maybe you want to have two variables to figure out, okay, am I holding the red view or am I holding the blue view? And then we don't want to move the other view. So it's really up to you what you want to do here. We've got our pause screen, which allows us to replay, go to our main menu. The thing that we need to work on now is the store, and there's going to be two parts to this. We need to do the UI, and then we need to implement some logic to keep track of what's being bought in our app. And we're not going to work with real money just yet. This is really just an introduction to get you started. So you can pretend that there's some play money in here, and it's a lot easier to sort of design the gameplay that way before you move into the whole real money world.